Hello and welcome to Transformed. I am your host, Josh McMullen, where we will discuss and explore topics and ideas on how to transform our current lives and to be the person we need to be and be the person that God created us to be. So today I kind of want to venture back to last week's episode of Out of the Valley. It kind of weighed on me all week long, just kind of staying with that similar topic. I just remember all the times that I got stuck and was stuck and in that really deep valley. And so I guess last week's episode was how to get out of the valley. But I guess it kept coming back to me of kind of why do we stay stuck in the valley? And why do we kind of remain chained to our old lives or our current lives, right? Like why do we remain chained to the person that we don't want to be? So I think the easiest answer, or the easier answer, is that we get comfortable, right? We say yes to the easiest life, the easy path. We want more money. We want a smaller waist. We want to feel healthier, right? We want certain things, but a lot of the time the desire to change is just the dream or that long off desire, right? Like it's something, a wish. It's really just a wish. And we find comfort with who we are because we don't really want to put any effort to be that person that we desire to be. So we just kind of keep telling lies to ourselves that hey, you're perfect the way you are. You're okay being where you are at now, and we kind of grow comfortable, to the chains, and we grow comfortable being in the valley. So I guess I just kind of want to keep exploring that topic of why do we keep being stuck? Why do we remain stuck in the valley? So I know a lot of other excuses. I'm just even thinking back to some of the excuses I had when I was stuck, years ago, and even still like today, right? You kind of revert back to old behavior. You have a lot of progress and you kind of keep reverting back, or kind of like in Proverbs, like with the dog returning to its vomit, right? Like a lot of the time we keep repeating bad habits, knowing it's bad for us, yet we do them anyway because again, it's kind of stuck. So I know what excuse I, hear a lot is, the thorn in my flesh, right? Paul mentioned that he had a thorn in his side. So I think a lot of times this is just the weight is just my thorn in my flesh. I'm always meant to be heavier. Or, my mom and dad behave this way, or I'm not hurting anyone, it's just affecting me. I had a friend, and they mentioned that we like to self-sabotage, right? And a lot of those excuses are pretty much self-sabotage. And so I think we do that to ourselves. We self-sabotage ourselves by the lies, by just telling ourselves, hey, these chains are comfortable, they're fine. Do you really want to get out of the chains? Do you really want to be that different person? This is how you're meant to be. Mom and dad acted this way, right? We tell ourselves so many different lies to just grow content and grow comfortable with who we are, even though maybe the person who we are right now isn't what God created us to be, right? So I know I told myself that a lot of those lies for many years. And I told myself I was heavier because, of family, genetics, poor eating behaviors. Now, some of that does play a part, right? But not all of those are true all the time. I think we tell ourselves those lies because I think we're afraid of change. I know I kind of grew weary of the putting in the effort to change. I was more comfortable eating, than not eating, right? I didn't want to put in the effort to not eat. I didn't want to put in the effort to go on a run, right? I would rather watch Netflix, watch, Office for the 12th time. And I was more comfortable losing my temper, watching pornography than practicing self-control. I think we're really an adaptive species, and we grow lazy and we take the easy road and the path of least resistance. I know I did. I know a lot of the issues I had were because I wanted to remain stuck, because I didn't want to put any effort, and I wanted to keep taking the path of least resistance. The problem when we do this, right, is there's a lot of warning and danger signs along that path of least resistance. So, and it kind of reminds me of hunting. I heard a couple of analogies about the path of least resistance. So if you hunt, And again, I'm a rookie hunter, so if there's anyone listening and they're more experienced at hunting, correct me if I'm wrong. But, if you go into the woods, right, you can kind of see some game trails that whether deer or other animals use, right? They kind of create a trail just from walking through there. And a lot of the time, especially for deer, right, they also like taking the path of least resistance. So they'll kind of keep, if it's an easy path and it's open, they'll kind of keep using that. And you can kind of tell in the woods when it's a very well-used path or a trail, it'll be really worn down, no vegetation or very little, and you can tell a lot of the tracks and stuff like that. And there's a lot of signs there that they're walking through there. But for a hunter, right, like that's kind of the signs you're looking for, because you're going to set your deer stand not too far off that path. So that path is actually dangerous. So and I like that analogy because a lot of the paths that we take, a lot of our habits create those pathways, create those mental pathways, and there's a lot of danger on those mental pathways, right? So the more often we repeat bad habits or we repeat, mistakes and errors, right, we're creating mental neuro pathways in our minds like a game trail, and it's easier and easier to keep going back and drawing from that well and making those mistakes. Like for me, Oreos, right? Go and eat an Oreo, you get a really good positive response from eating an Oreo. You're creating a neural pathway to forming habits of, oh, well, I'm stressed and I like to eat Oreos. So anytime you get stressed, right, it's kind of like conditioning. You're kind of like creating that pathway to certain bad habits. Whether it's porn, cheating, lying, right, eating Oreos, any of those things, right, like you can create mental pathways to those habits. But you could also do that for good things too, like, prayer, reading the Bible, exercise, stuff like that. You can create good pathways, but a lot of the time we're forming bad pathways and we're staying on the bad path. But when we're on that bad path, there's danger, right? The hunters are on that path, and danger, right, for sin is on that path. And if we keep going back and we keep using that trail, it's going to keep getting wider and wider and wider, and it's going to be more dangerous and dangerous as we keep using it. So I think we keep reinforcing and conditioning ourselves to go down the same path. And I know I've said it a few times in the previous episodes, but change is extremely hard. It's going to be one of the hardest things that we do. And ultimately it comes down to if we're going to truly want to change, but also it kind of comes down to, do we want to break those neural pathways? Do we want to break the bad habits, right, and start forming new neural pathways to positive things? Like, so instead of watching Netflix and watching Office for the 12th time, maybe you go out for that run. Instead of watching pornography or getting angry or whatever it is, right, having anxiety and worry, maybe you do something positive with some of those emotions that you have. So those are some of the excuses I've had. It's kind of some of the process and thoughts that I had with some of my valleys. I know I read an article and it talked about some other reasons why we might remain stuck. So fear, it seems to be like the biggest one on a lot of lists, is fear. Whether it's fear of change, fear of failure, putting yourself out there, right? Fear of what we can't change, the fear of the unknown. There's a lot of fear that goes into why we stay stuck and why we don't move. So I struggle with fear. It's kind of one of those things where, looking back, I would say, no, I wasn't afraid of a lot of stuff. But really, I was afraid of failure. I am afraid of failure. And I'm afraid of failure at performance. Like, for football, for example, I wasn't a good football player. But also I kind of started eventually developing a fear of even being put in the game, right? I didn't want to perform because I knew I would mess up. And then if I mess up, right, then you let your teammates down, you let your coaches down, you let the school down, right? You've kind of eventually kind of get this mental cycle where, well, I don't want to mess up. Maybe you mess up in practice, and it's like, they start to develop that trend of, well, if I mess up in practice, I mess up in the game, and we blow the big play, we lose the game. You start to develop this fear of even doing the right thing or even wanting to be even put in the game. And even like for baseball, it's even earlier on, I developed even more fear of kind of the yips. It's it's a sports term, and it's been even in the media a lot lately, just with golfers, basketball players, and people being afraid to perform or having these, mental issues or mental blocks on performance. And so for me, like the yips even went back to when I was like in Little League. I would have a good throw. I didn't have a good throwing motion, but I had a throwing motion and it was effective for me. And between coaches and my dad and everyone trying to tweak the throw, like, hey, you're doing well, but if we tweak your throwing motion just a little bit, we could maybe make it even a more effective throw. Like I pitched and I played center field and with all of that feedback, I eventually started getting a quirk where you put a baseball in my hand, even to this day. We went to Minnesota and we were playing catch. Even to this day, in Minnesota, put a baseball in my hand, and I can't guarantee where it's going to go. You could stand 10 feet or 10 yards or 50 yards away from me, and I cannot guarantee where it's going to go. And it's the weirdest thing. I start thinking, and I can't even throw a baseball. Now, put a football in my hands, and I'm a lot more accurate. I'm a lot, it's like no issues whatsoever, but put a baseball or a softball or something in my hand, and I just kind of start developing in this fear of even throwing the ball because I'm afraid of where it's going to land. And sure enough, by self-fulfilling prophecy, it goes not anywhere where I wanted it to go. And so you kind of get in your head again, and that's kind of where the yips term comes in, where you eventually kind of lose the ability to function like you normally would, right? Whether it's putting, like, or doing a layup or a free throw. If you fail at it, eventually you get in your head and you eventually keep failing at it. It's like a snowball effect. So I think we often get afraid of putting ourselves out there and wanting to change because we're afraid of feedback from others. We're afraid of even putting in the effort to change because we might not succeed. And so we'd rather just stand on the sidelines than even get put in the game because we don't want to even perform. We don't want to fail at the performance. Another reason is a lot of the I don'ts, right? The I don't know or the I don't need to, maybe some denial. I don't know how. I know I get that one a lot, is I don't really know how, I really don't know what to do. I think it can be true, right? Weight loss or change, it can be unnerving, right? It could be especially if you have maybe multiple things you have to change like I did, it can be a little unnerving of where to start. But I think a lot of the problem is we just got to start. Like I learned so much along the way. It wasn't like I went out and did all this research on how to lose weight and how to run and how to do, weight loss. I did those things, but I was also trying to do those things along the way as well. I didn't just, research all this stuff and then start dieting and then start running, right? I pretty much started running, and then kind of one of those, you got to learn how to build a plane while it's in the air. And you kind of just have to do it and kind of learn your mistakes and learn how to do things while doing them. Because I think, again, if you keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it, and then you just never do it. So I think the I don't knows often play a big key factor in why we stay stuck in the valleys, because we just say, I really don't know how to, or I don't need to, and we just leave it at that. Also, kind of with that, I don't need to is I think a lot of the time we don't want to fully break the change. I think sometimes not only do we get comfortable, but I think especially with sin, right? It can be pleasurable for a season, for a moment. And I think a lot of the time we just kind of get trapped into that you don't want to break because you don't want to change. Maybe you don't want to be that new person. Maybe you don't want to let go of some bad habits. And which is what I kind of talked about with like reversion, like, right? Like the revert back to old behavior. A lot of the time you see that, like for me, it took 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 2 steps forward and 4 steps back. And whether that was with weight loss or what, temptation, like for me, it was when I was like, wow, I haven't been tempted in months. I've got a really good, stronghold on watching pornography. And then next thing you know, it's like, you mess up and you're kind of back to square one and feeling really bad about yourself and kind of believing the lies that Satan tells you and kind of spiraling in and kind of again back in the valley and back, stuck to some old chains. And but the reality is we don't need to be stuck to those chains, and we don't we got to also realize you got to want to let go of the chains, right? Let go of